Okay, the next section we want to talk about is what are some of the barriers to potential barriers to implementing the faith-based initiatives and the school voucher program, but also to reconnecting the disconnection between science and religion, or medicine religion, or psychology and religion, for a third example. Okay. The separation, the split between science and religion seems to extend all the way into psychology and psychiatry.
Yeah.
I'll mention a couple examples in my lifetime. In about, 1975, after a lot of tension in my family, my father went to a psychiatrist to visit and get some advice and guidance on how our family could resolve some of our problems. And he described to the psychiatrist that our family had a lot of tension and conflict and disagreement and discord. And the psychiatrist listened to the whole story and listened to the reasons, and his advice was that it wasn't working out and they should get a divorce. So he didn't have in his repertoire of solutions the solution that my father, Dr. Bennett, had when he dealt with his patient by the name of Ollie, which I told the story of, which is to recommend forgiveness and resolution of discord.
Practices great spiritual values in life.
Yes, exactly. He didn't know the connection between discord and broken families, and he didn't know these truths which he could use to enlighten and lead down to a path of solutions. So consequently, they got a divorce, and there was consequences, negative consequences to that, but it didn't did partially help the problem, but he just didn't have an understanding of the superior solution.
No.
Which is detailed in the Bible.
That's right, yeah.
So we want to look at what are some of the underlying barriers to the solutions we've been discussing. And it's something that I've taken a great interest in, and so we'll be talking about some of Billy Graham's thoughts on it, some of Lynn Cheney's thoughts on the problem, Hugh Downs, Robert J. Lifton, and Daniel Goleman. So to start with, let's look at one of the issues I want to talk about is prejudice. And specifically, there's prejudice against Christians and the Christian philosophy, or the issue we're going to talk about may even extend to other religious groups. I'm sure it does. So let's first look at the definition of prejudice, and this is from the Penguin Dictionary of Psychology. Prejudice. The literal meaning is with reference to an act of prejudging, a forming of an attitude prior to having sufficient information, a preconception. Number 2, a negative attitude towards a particular group of persons based on negative traits assumed to be uniformly displayed by all members of that group. 3, a failure to react toward a person as an individual with individual qualities, but rather to treat him or her as possessing the presumed stereotypes of his or her socially or racially defined group. So if we look at that definition, it becomes apparent that there are unintentional prejudices against Christians.
Yeah, right.
And here's several examples. Well, one of them would be to fail to recognize the value of somebody like you in healing, of doctors and psychologists. So there's ministers. So there's a negative attitude which diminishes your value in the eyes of medicine as a resource to solve some of these problems we've been talking about.
Right.
So it's not intentional, but we're going to deal with it and hopefully solve it.
Right.
Then here's several other examples. With regard to our social problems, and this directly starts to connect the idea of prejudice with the faith-based initiative. The federal government has a policy of taking part of our paycheck in taxes.
Yeah.
And because of various social pressures, they're forced to take that money and put it into social programs that are devoid of the Christian philosophy.
That's right. Or religion. Or
Yeah.
religion.
Or religion.
The spiritual values of life. Yeah.
So this has been going on for 200 years.
Oh yeah.
And it's gotten progressively worse.
That's right. Yeah. Right.
So it seems to me that one of the potentials of this dialogue is to reveal that issue and recognize that since half Americans are Christian, approximately,
Yeah.
that if we take their money, we have to put half of that money back into Christian-based solutions.
Right. Yeah.
For drug problems, if somebody's on drugs, they should have the option of going to a Christian-based program, even if it's at a church.
That's right. Yeah. Sure. That's right. Yeah.
So, or let's think of some other examples. If somebody goes into the doctor and the doctor says, for example, Dr. Bennett says, go talk to your priest about forgiveness. Well, if that starts happening in mass, they're not going to have enough people in the churches.
Well.
So maybe we need to figure out some way that some of that money, some of those healthcare spending dollars, can go to the churches.
Right.
To increase their staffing.
Right.
Maybe put a nurse there.
That's right. That's the whole philosophy back of the faith-based program of the president and this administration. Right here.
Excellent. Now I didn't understand it until you shared with me the Bible. So,
That's right.
We may end up playing a critical role in helping our healthcare system.
That's right. Yeah. That's
become repaired.
Right. Yeah.
Let's see. So the churches have been effectively solving problems for
200 years.
2,000. Thousands of years.
2,000 years, right, yeah. Right.
Thousands of years, right?
Right.
So before the United States was formed, then there were no taxes collected in the United States, I guess, except for the British taxes. But people had more money in their pockets to give to the churches so that the churches could then have the staffing to go out and solve these problems.
Yeah, right, yeah.
But because of this new idea in the United States that they came up with 200 years ago of a separation of church and state,
which was misunderstood by the liberals, the communists, the socialists, the atheists, misunderstood entirely, see.
So maybe it was taken too far. Maybe it was taken from freedom
absolutely,
to something more nefarious.
Out of England and Europe, the state said, you will go to this particular church group, you see. And in the United States, we said, when our forefathers came here, they said, the separation of church and state meant that the state is not going to tell you, the government's not going to tell you which church you have to go to, see. We'll encourage you to go to some church, to some synagogue, see, to some spiritual institution, see. But we won't tell you which one you have to go to, you see. And most of these people get all confused on that. They don't understand that, you see. They don't understand freedom. They don't understand freedom, see.
That's a great point, because that makes sense. They don't understand that freedom includes the freedom to go whatever school you want.
That's right.
Get whatever kind of health care you want.
That's exactly right.
So if you take that separation of church and state too far, then pretty soon the church is over here and the health care is over here and the education's way over there.
That's right, yeah.
And creates chaos.
But there have been great statesmen and great preachers And Norman Vincent Peale has been one of them this century, and Billy Graham was another one, and Bob Schuller is another one, and other great preachers. There have been hundreds, thousands of great spiritual leaders in the nation that understand that thoroughly, see. But the communists and the socialists and the liberals, left-wingers, and the atheists, they don't understand that, see. And so they come up with this First Amendment rights, and we can't, it's unconstitutional and all like that. And you can't take these children in the school and tell them that they ought to be in a school and church, And you ought to be able to read the Bible and study the Bible and pray whenever you want to, see. And so I tell you, when these evil systems come into being in a world and take control of the people, and it's just it's a terrible tragedy what it does to the people of a nation, see. And the ultimate is the when they take complete control of a nation and decide that their nation is going to conquer other nations and control other nations, you see. And so that's what Russia and the communists have been trying to do, and for 100 years or more.
Yeah. So maybe you're talking about the atheists and the right-wingers and the liberals.
Left-wingers.
Or left-wingers, was it? Are anti the Bible, so maybe that's a little bit of paranoid thinking.
No, it's not.
No,
it's realistic thinking.
No, paranoid thinking by them.
Oh yeah.
That they are. There's a severe paranoia. The Bible, we got to be scared of it. We got to shut it all up, lock it in the closet.
Yeah, well, they don't.
Severe paranoia.
They don't understand the Bible.
Yeah.
They don't understand the Bible. See, but our great preachers of the forefathers and our great statesmen, our forefathers who founded this country and wrote the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, those men understood. See, and so.
All right. Yeah, I'm particularly became more appreciative of the Bible when I learned that the founders of America had an intense, very close relationship to Christianity and the Bible.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely.
And so this is something I never learned in school.
No, right. Because the atheists and the communists and the socialists have misused the Constitution and the freedoms that we have in America, and got the Bible thrown out of the schools and prayer thrown out of the schools. You see, we always had prayer, and as I was growing up and in my ministry for 50 years, the schools, the public school systems, they invited the ministers of the community in to address an assembly of the whole school, you see.
Wow.
Well, sure, right, yeah. Right,
really?
Yeah. And always at graduation, many times a minister would deliver the graduation address to the students, you see.
So now it's changed so that now it's something like some kind of stigma on Christians.
Yeah, right.
These people are weirdos, we don't want to hear from them.
That's right, yeah, right.
All right. Well, we're going to look at right now. Why is that happening? And we'll look at it. We'll look at the idea of spiritual alienation, and something called psychic numbing. These are all concepts, and denial.
Yep.
That'll help us to understand this problem.
That's right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Okay. So now here's another. By the way, let me just mention now that the system that we're talking about also especially discriminates against poor people, because if poor people don't have the school voucher program, then they can't go to a private school that's Christian.
That's right.
But people that have a lot of money, they always have that option.
Always have that option, yeah.
Whereas the poor people, they're the ones that maybe need it the most.
That's right.
I mean,
well, everybody needs it.
Yeah, everybody needs it, but you know, they're especially in crisis.
Well,
is what I'm saying.
Actually, if the union movement came out of the labor movement came out of Russia, communism. See, that's how it came out. See, and so the unions take control of the teachers, and the teachers' union, see, and so that's. And communism has just ruined the country and ruined the world. Ruined the world, see. So
I understand. Well, we're going to be looking into in our next project to understand exactly what happened. It would be interesting to look at the history of how that whole thing progressed, and that way, by illuminating that, maybe we can have an easier time making some new choices or some changes.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So the third way that Christians seem to be discriminated against is that because of the stigma on Christianity, unfair stigma, that television does the same thing. Like Christianity is sort of tuned out of the majority of television, it seems.
That's right.
We have the people that have their television shows and that are Christian, and those are great. The Hour of Power, for example. But that's my only explanation for how I could go for 35 years and not know this material.
Well,
you know,
nobody pointed to the Bible until I did.
Yeah, yeah. And there's this odd sort of tuning out that just in most television, it just it's totally excluded. And so we'll be looking at that in a minute. Especially, there's a book here called Censored, The News That Didn't Make the News. And there's a great introduction written by Hugh Downs in which he explains why that might be happening, that people in the media, you know, as humans, they tune out the issues and ideas that are uncomfortable to them.
Right, yeah.
And therefore tune it out of the viewing public's mind.
Right, yeah.
So, in a sense, it's an issue of reality and truth are being tuned out.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. So we're going to explore how and why that's happening. So, okay, so next we're going to turn to Lynn Cheney's book, and here she starts in the introduction on page 19. As George Orwell showed in 1984, in a world where objective truth is denied, definitions become exceedingly slippery, and anything can mean almost anything else. So much that follows from denying the idea of truth is deeply unsettling. We have to worry not only about whether our educational and cultural institutions will pass along an accurate and balanced history to our children, like learning about the Bible and the founders were Christian, but also about whether they will communicate to them the importance of reason, of trying to overcome bias, of using evidence to arrive at conclusions, understandings that they will have to have if they are ever to be able to judge what they are told. I want to consider the distortions and divisions being wrought by a kind of thinking that denies there is truth, and to examine how it is that this postmodern approach has become entrenched and powerful. I want to look at the origins of the radical skepticism of our time, examine its claims to legitimacy, and finally suggest what we can do to blunt its force and restore truth and reason to a central place in our lives.
Good.
Great stuff.
Very good.
So now here's an example of how this issue is important and how the problem is creating some problems for us. In late spring 1994, an incident in Philadelphia provided a chilling vision of life without such qualities. 49-year-old Mohammed Jaberpour was working a route in South Philadelphia in a Minister Softy ice cream truck when a 16-year-old tried to extort money from him. Jabarapur refused to give the 16-year-old what he demanded, and the youth shot Jabarapur. As the father of 3 lay dying, neighborhood teenagers laughed at him and mocked his agony with a rap song they composed on the spot. Quote, "They killed Mr. Softy." Another ice cream truck driver and friend of Jabarapur, who came in the scene shortly after the shooting, described what he saw. "It wasn't human," he said. "When I got there, people were laughing and asking me for ice cream. I was crying. My best friend was killed. They were acting as though a cat had died, not a human being." Accounting for such behavior is no simple matter. People who behave this way have obviously become desensitized to violence, probably because they have seen so much of it. Now, just as an aside, let me interject the definition of dissociation, because we're talking about how she mentions the desensitization to violence. And so the line of thinking that we're developing is that people, let's say for example in the inner city, maybe those people were in the inner city, are exposed to so much violence around them that they become desensitized to it. And that's how some of them become killers.
Tragedy, yeah.
Because they're totally, we always see the killers in the courtrooms, in the media, and the judge is saying, "You have no remorse, you're showing no remorse." And everybody wonders, well, why are they showing no remorse? Why are they totally desensitized to violence?
That's right.
So according to the other books we mentioned before from the doctors at Harvard, that's what they're saying, is that people are exposed to so much violence, either directly or indirectly, that they become totally desensitized from it. And
they're not exposed in our schools and colleges and universities to the truth that makes you free.
Yep. That's what we're getting
free
at.
Indeed.
Yep.
Free indeed, yeah.
Yep. Yep. They don't have those scripts
That's
for
right.
living
That's right.
which clear up the past traumas.
That's right, yeah.
And the desensitization.
That's right, yeah. Tragedy.
Okay, so here's dissociation in the Dictionary of Psychology by Penguin. It says, H.S. Sullivan used the term to characterize the process whereby thoughts or memories that produce anxiety are cut off from consciousness. So the line of thinking is that people who are traumatized, who grow up in violent environments, become dissociated from their good side.
That's right.
And all they become aware of is their anger, their hostility. They become like a machine.
Yeah.
Totally cut off.
Right.
It's sort of like a splitting of personality. And that's talked about a lot in the Scientific America article that I mentioned from the doctor in Harvard. The way he describes it is the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain become sort of split, and one side is for emotions, and so people kind of lose touch with their emotions, and empathy just disappears from their consciousness.
That's right. Right, yeah. Harvard was established as a school, as a university to train preachers.
Really?
Right, yeah. Train ministers of America, see.
That's interesting.
Sure, right, yeah.
And then at some point are they still doing that?
No. They've gone off the deep end.
Wow, well that may be an example, a case study.
That's right.
That we want to look into a little bit
well,
in the future.
It's amazing, just amazing what's happened to our universities, our schools, our everything,
So, to continue here, columnist Bob Greene suggests that their insensitivity reveals a contemporary confusion of entertainment and reality. We have increasingly become a nation of citizens who watch anything and everything as if it's all a show. But however it has come about, people who laugh at a dying man have no sense that a stranger can suffer just as they do, that his death creates sorrow for someone just as would the death of someone close to them. They have lost the animating perception of compassion.
That's right.
The awareness, as Josiah Royce described it, that another person is just as real, as actual, as concrete as thou art.
Right. Absolutely, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Without the idea that we live in reality with other people who are as real as we are, compassion is impossible, and so is any other virtue one could name.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing beyond the gratification of the moment matters in such a world. Not fairness, not justice, not responsibility, not honor. None of them matters because in such a world none of them exists. The pathology involved in the murder of Mohammed Jabaripur and the behavior of the crowd afterward runs so deep that it is clear there is no single explanation for it and no easy remedy.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not.
That's right.
We're working on the remedy.
Yeah, right.
I hope she's wrong on that.
That's right, yeah.
But it is also evident that intellectual elites do no one a favor by sending through society messages that there is no external reality in which we all participate, that there is only the game of the moment, the entertainment of the day. Outside the protective environment of the campus, these ideas have real and devastating effects.
Mm-hmm.
The virtues that we have increasingly come to believe we must nurture if we are to be successful as a culture simply make no sense if we turn away from reason and reality.
That's right.
Thus, whether we as a society find the will to live in truth is more than a matter for idle speculation.
Mm-hmm.
The answer may very well determine whether we survive.
That's right. That's right.
All right. So the next thing we'll talk about is two critical ideas. One is called escapism,
Mm-hmm.
that I learned from Billy Graham, and the other one is psychic numbing.
Okay.
Okay, so here we're going to read from A World of Flame by Billy Graham, and again let me mention it's from 1965.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's amazing to me that more people don't know about this information.
That's right.
But we're going to work on changing that. Escapism. Millions are busy burying their heads in the sand, pretending that the devastating events of our times are not really happening. They are desperately trying to escape the realities of the pressures of modern living. Escapism is not in itself a condition of mental sickness, but a subconscious mechanism to escape reality. It is a mode of behavior adopted to evade unpleasant facts and realities. It can take many forms. The harassed housewife goes on a shopping spree, while someone else may take refuge in a clandestine love affair or a Watusi session.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most conspicuous modes of escape is alcoholism, which is now a national catastrophe.
That's right.
Each week in our Minneapolis office, we receive thousands of letters, more than half of which have to do with domestic problems, and half of these are related to problems of drinking.
Mm-hmm.
Drinking has become one of our most serious social problems. It is basically the result of an attempt to escape from the responsibilities and realities of life. Now, let me just interject here that there's escaping the responsibilities and realities of life, which, if we describe somebody who drinks as having that may be true, but then also the flip side may be true. For example, let's see, Ted Turner, for example, not to put him on the spot or anything, but Jane Fonda said that he was drinking a little bit more than she thought was healthy.
That's right,
But
yeah.
the guy faces reality. He's looking out in the world and looking at all the suffering.
Mm-hmm.
He's feeling distress. He's mentally thinking about how can we solve these problems. He's spending his money on solving the problems, and he's positive that spending all of his money is not going to solve all of them.
No.
Because we need to be applying a lot more money to the problems.
Because he hasn't really found God yet.
Well, that's true. That may be true.
Yeah, right.
But at the same time, he also seems to have found it in his heart. in that he's acting in a responsible way to try to help other people.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, give everybody their due, you see. And so he's got problems too, as a lot of people have problems, see.
Yeah.
So
Yep, and part of his problem is that he empathizes with other people.
Yeah.
And that, believe me, I mean, you know for sure.
Sure.
You know, you and I know that that creates stress.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, sure.
So,
right, yeah.
Just as an aside, another aside.
And Jane Fonda didn't help him when they married.
Really?
That's right. Absolutely. Sure. Right. Yeah.
I thought she did.
No.
Really?
No. She,
well, okay,
she helped him after she came to God and Christ, but then they were divorced. See, and so, anyway, but that's all right. Yeah.
Yeah, well, she's working on it. We're going to help her too.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Hopefully.
Well, she's
going to help us. Hopefully too.
She's going to a Baptist church there in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And making some progress.
Definitely.
Right.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Me too. I'm making progress too.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's pause for 1 second. So just to turn back to Ted Turner, because he's such a great example of somebody who really is striving to be a hero in life and really help people. So he may be drinking to reduce his stress. I've done that. So let me mention a particular concept which we're going to be going over more in our future explorations, and that's it's an idea that I learned from UCLA. It was a medical paper that came out of there, and really powerful idea. And they talk about an idea called a failure of repression. Repression is a psychological defense mechanism by which people become desensitized to the suffering of others. Where, like, to use an example, when I watched the video of somebody killing somebody else, I felt horror. So I don't have a failure of repression. The people who did this, they had a failure of repression. They don't have any feelings about what they're doing.
Right, yeah.
People who kill don't have any feelings. They don't have enough feelings. So they're having a lot of repression. They don't have any normal reaction to
I sat
suffering.
in a restaurant with a man that said, "We just blew him away. We just blew him away." See?
Yeah.
We just killed him. See? Just blew him away.
Just nonchalant.
Yeah. Right.
No biggie. Yeah. So that, in psychology, they call that repression. And it's a result of being around too much suffering.
That's right.
When we're around too much suffering, it overloads our stress circuits, and then our brain kicks in and says, we're not going to have any feelings about the suffering around us. And that's going on a lot in the inner cities where there's so much suffering.
Yeah.
So Ted Turner and myself and you would be examples of, we have a failure of repression. It's a positive failure. So we feel for other people's suffering. So we're going to have a little more stress than somebody who tunes all of these problems out. So
I'm trying to think of somebody else, better examples. Of course, you know, Billy Graham and Norman Vincent Peale and Bob Schuller and others like them. I prefer to use those men. Really, those are the men that really made a difference. And so I know what's happened to Ted and all like that. And but anyway, he's not the greatest example for the world. See?
yeah, well, everybody has their shortcomings,
right? Yeah,
and he seems to have a few, just like me. But he's a good example of somebody who cares.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and who acts on it.
Right. Yeah. Right. And others, That's right, yeah, I understand, yeah. He pledged $1 billion over a 10-year period of time to, and so on like that, so,
All right. So I wanted to cite Ted Turner as an example because he may be drinking a little bit not to escape from reality, but he's facing reality and that he's looking out at the world problems and trying to figure out how he can alleviate suffering. So he's not escaping reality, but by tuning reality in, he gets more stress, and so he may be drinking a little bit to bring that stress down at night.
Yeah.
So let me go on here. It says, volumes could be written on the problem of dope addiction. Millions of barbiturates are swallowed every night to help the nation sleep. Millions of tranquilizers keep us calm during the day. Millions of pep pills wake us up in the morning after the hangovers of the night before. The Bible warns that these flights from reality bring no lasting satisfaction.
That's right.
So the Bible says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness.
That's right, yeah.
For they will be filled. So that's saying facing reality.
That's right, absolutely, yeah.
Blessed are the peacemakers.
Right.
That's an example of face reality.
That's right, absolutely.
Deal with it. Blessed are those who mourn,
Sure.
for they shall be comforted. That's an example of a prescription to face your pain.
That's right.
Face your depression.
The Sermon on the Mount, the greatest sermon ever preached.
Yep. Powerful ideas.
That's right, yeah.
It's sort of a prescription to counteract denial.
Right, absolutely, yeah.
In the Sermon on the Mount it says, reconcile with your brother.
That's right, yeah.
Forgive.
Forgive.
So those are all...
Love.
Those are all facing
Care.
reality.
Right, yeah.
Okay, so now let's bring up this another concept here, another special psychology concept in the Dictionary of Psychology. It's called cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is an emotional state set up when two simultaneously held attitudes or cognitions are inconsistent, or when there is a conflict between belief and overt behavior. The resolution of the conflict is assumed to serve as a basis for attitude change, in that belief patterns are generally modified so as to be consistent with behavior. So that's an important idea, because what they're saying in the psychology textbook is that when we have two contradictory beliefs, or a belief and then a contradictory reality, it creates inner tension. So our stress goes up. So in order to reduce our stress, our subconscious modifies certain beliefs. So if the Bible says, bear ye one another's burdens and so fulfill the laws of Christ, and let's say we're that kind of person, like Ted Turner, or like you, and we strive to do that, and we strive to do that, if that gets us exposed to too much stress, and we exceed our internal capacity for stress, then something has to give. Something has to change. So what goes out the window is our philosophy of bearing one another's burdens.
Right, yeah.
So we become estranged or disconnected from our philosophy. And this would explain Billy Graham's observation that many people don't live by the Bible.
Sure, that's right. Yeah.
But they believe in it and they're committed Christians with all their heart and all their soul. But if people reach the maximum of their stress capacity, then they tune out the world's problems. Have you experienced some people as having that problem?
Oh yeah, well, sure, right, yeah. People face these problems all the time. But you see, Billy's great ministry, this man has preached face to face in his crusades to over 200 million people.
Wow.
200 million people. And by television and radio, he preached in one day to 2.5 billion people, pointing them to God, to spirituality, to righteousness, to Christ, to the Bible, see.
Well, for me, he's an example of somebody who tunes reality in.
Oh, yeah.
Tunes suffering in.
That's right, yeah.
Him and his son, they have this great organization called Samaritan's Purse that you shared with me.
That's right, yeah.
And so, for some reason, it appears that the Christian philosophy gives people a huge amount of power to deal with reality.
It's the only philosophy in the world, the only principles in the world that work.
Yeah.
That work, see? That's right, yeah. Right, yeah.
All right.
Most of the good things that happen in the world is because somebody has been exposed to the Bible and Christ and God and the Judeo-Christian religion, and been inspired to go out and do the good things in the world, to take care of the hungry and the poor and the sick and the downtrodden, and and to help people. Just see, the tragedy is that many people in the world just go about. It was said of Jesus, Jesus went about doing good. See? So there's a difference, see? Don't just go about, but go about doing good. 100 million people in our world volunteer to do some good things every year. 100 million people volunteer, see?
Well, that's a good point. And this connection between the Christian philosophy and good that happens in the world is something that I was never aware of until recently.
That's right.
With your help. So it's like, because the Christian religion is stigmatized and it's pushed into the background, there's all these people who are doing good, and the reason that they're doing good is because they've internalized the scripts of the Bible, the prescriptions of the Bible, and then they live by them.
They've listened to the great preachers of America, see? And they've gone to church and Sunday school and youth meetings and Christian Endeavor and Youth for Christ and all the other good organizations, you see. And heard God's message and Christ's message, and it's changed their lives.
Yep.
So when they see evil and people who are in need, they respond. See, so.
Well, hopefully our program will be able to explain to people this foundation for good works, which has been going on for thousands of years.
That's right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And that would be the foundation which launched America.
That's right.
I believe that we need to have appreciation for Christians as the Christian religion really founded America.
That's right.
Made America possible.
Absolutely. Yeah.
These founders of America had ingrained in their brain fairness, truth, honesty. Everyone's equal.
That's right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So that's where they got that from.
Sure. That's right. Yeah.
All right. Okay, so it's possible that this concept of cognitive dissonance explains the escapism and the split of whereby Christians are not living by the Bible in some cases. And I'll mention a book that I didn't bring today. It's called The Day America Told the Truth. And it's a very interesting book in which they surveyed maybe 1,000 Americans and asked them a lot of questions about what they were going through and how they were living and such. And one of their observations is that Christian people in large part do not live by the Bible. They don't consult it every day.
That's right, yeah, because as one friend of mine says, 95% of the people are Christians, but only 5% go to church. See? So that's
yeah, that makes sense.
They don't get fed, you see, and buoyed up, and and learn more about what Christianity is all about. See?
And so the psychological explanation of that would be that the Christians are just overloaded on stress.
Yeah, right, they are.
And,
right.
you know, it's been going on for hundreds of years. We have a war every 10 years.
That's right, yeah.
You know, somebody attacks us.
Yeah.
We live in a violent society.
That's right.
Approximately, according to the National Center for PTSD, approximately 60% of Americans have experienced a major trauma, like child abuse, child neglect,
Right, yeah.
Molesting,
Terrible.
death in the family.
Right, yeah.
You know, most people that I know have had something like that happen to them.
Right, yeah.
So the psychological explanation would be that those traumas and the stresses of our society cause religious people to have to mentally disconnect from some of the rules of the Bible.
Yeah. Yeah.
And another factor in that might be that because of all the stress, people develop some symptoms of depression like anger, and then they're feeling angry. And you know, if you're Christian and the Bible says anger is a sin, but you're having constant anger every day, then
you need to get back to the Bible.
Getting back to the Bible would cure it.
Would cure it, right.
But in the absence of understanding, people wouldn't understand, and their brain might tune out the rule that anger is a sin.
That's right, yeah.
Some people that I talk to that are Christian, they don't even know that anger is a sin.
That's right, that's right, yeah.
And they have it in their life, and they have it in their family.
That's right, yeah.
And when I read the Bible, I saw it in at least a dozen places.
That's right, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Right, yeah. Right, yeah.
Is that accurate?
That's right.
So anger is just a sin, right?
It's a sin. Well, sure it is.
Wrath is a sin.
Wrath is a sin, right, yeah.
So, but
jealous is a sin.
I think we also have to be understanding of ourselves and compassionate that anger is also a symptom of too much stress.
That's right, yeah, right.
So we have to look for a cure for that. Okay, so here's an example Colonel Barber found me from the Bible. It's Matthew chapter 5:18. For assuredly I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, one jot or one tittle will by no means pass from the law till all is fulfilled.
That's right. Till all is fulfilled. That's important, see. He came as a fulfillment of the law, see.
And has it happened yet?
No.
The law hasn't been fulfilled, right?
He fulfilled those. Two things. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and spirit. In other words, your whole being.
I see. And so he came to help us, to show us the way to fulfill all the laws. Okay. And here it's saying that every single one of them needs to be fulfilled. Okay. Okay. Money? Cheeseburgers? Haagen-Dazs ice cream? You know? Yeah. Okay. All right. So here it says, number 19, whoever therefore breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches men so shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. but whoever does and teaches them, he shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. So, in the case of Dr. Bennett, he would be doing that when he told his patient to forgive. Go see your priest. So the doctor was aiding people with that. And other doctors could do that. In some cases, but we're finding out, and we're going to be looking into it more, that in a lot of cases they aren't. So it says, "For I say to you that unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven." You have heard that it was said to those of old, "You shall not murder," and whoever murders will be in danger of the judgment. But I say to you that whoever is angry with his brother without a cause shall be in danger of the judgment. Yeah. So sometimes anger is okay. Let's say if somebody is continually perpetrating an injustice against you, you could develop this symptom of anger. But I suppose that's righteous. But what it seems to also be saying is that we do have to try to resolve the situation so that we're then free of anger. So we're angry at the thing that happened, some of the terrorist acts, but at the same time, we're looking and we're implementing solutions so that we don't have to be angry anymore. We're searching for, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. We're searching for what is the path by which we can end that problem so that we don't have to be angry. So it says, "Therefore, if you bring your gift to the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar, and go your way. First, be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift." That's great. Okay, so let's read a little bit more here from A World of Flame. So this is a little bit more that Billy Graham wrote, which illuminates this issue of cognitive dissonance and spiritual alienation. He calls it double thinking. How does a society develop the kind of psychosis that plagues us today? It is the product of many things, including the loss of religious faith, faulty education, and too much softness. In his book, 1984, George Orwell describes what he calls doublethink. This is not an original idea, for the Bible says, "A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways." Nationally, we are in a state of double-mindedness that could endanger our very survival. Doublethink, or double-mindedness, means the faculty of holding two contradictory beliefs in one's mind and accepting both of them. Like, love your neighbor as yourself, and then tolerating anger in your life, instead of forgiveness to eradicate anger. Genius. So what we're doing is we're bringing the scientific evidence back with what he's saying, because he was right on 50 years ago. So he goes on. Eric Fromm, in his book Will Man Prevail, says, quote, "While people believe in God, they are not concerned with God. That is, they do not worry or lose sleep over religious or spiritual problems. Most people of the West say they believe in God, hence in God's principles of love, justice, truth, and humility. Yet these ideas have little influence on their behavior. Most of us are motivated by the wish for greater material comfort, security, and prestige. Ideals can easily be turned into shibboleths, mere catchwords. The ideal becomes alienated. It ceases to be an authentic experience and becomes instead an idol outside of ourselves to which we pay homage and which we use to cover up dishonesty and immorality. So he says the ideal becomes alienated. That's what we're talking about with spiritual alienation. And again, Dr. Brende at Mercer University is an expert on that. And so we'll be talking about his work on how traumatic experiences lead to this issue. Okay, now he's talking about the remedy. When we look for a remedy for a condition that produces an unhealthy national psychosis, we should remember that what was said by Bernard Iddings Bell, quote, "All human predicaments are not to be resolved by tinkering with the symptoms, because our disorders are not those of mere housekeeping. It is the whole sewer system that is out of whack." End quote. In times of national problems, we should be hearing the voice of God in His effort to have us think His thoughts after Him. Many times we miss the purpose of national catastrophes. Charles C. West says, quote, "We turn to God for help when our foundations are shaking, only to learn that it is God who is shaking them." End quote. Perhaps out of all this, God is speaking to the nation and to the individual. We are not made for emptiness. We are not made for boredom. We are not created to cringe in fear. Our anxiety, our mental anguish, our concerns all reach upward for purpose and fulfillment. There are signs in the sky. They portend a better life, a better way, a better day. It is Jesus Christ who gives dignity and worth to the individual. He says, "For what shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his soul?"
That's my text of my first sermon I preached.
Wow.
Right.
That's powerful.
That's right.
That's from Mark 8:36. Christ taught that in the sight of God, one soul is worth the entire materialistic world.
That's right, yeah.
In God's sight, the individual is all important. Now, what I think is really powerful about that, several things. One is that one soul is worth the entire materialistic world.
That's right.
Let me introduce a logical idea, which I don't know if it's been talked about very much. And if we take into account the issue of contagious emotions and everything that we're discussing, we would conclude that if we look at the most miserable, unhappy people in society, and we look at the most successful, happy people in society, there's a connection between the two. So, the only way that we're going to make the top people happier is for the bottom people to be lifted up.
Yeah.
Because as miserable as the misery we see around us drags everybody down.
Yeah, right, yeah.
As we can see from Dr. Bennett's quote on avoidance, that he recommends tuning out all of these problems, you know, to help to reduce your own stress.
That's right.
But then if we make that permanent, then it's still going on out there, and it gets to us in other ways.
That's right.
Like we walk around the city and we have to live in fear.
That's right.
Because there's people that are so distressed that they're turning violent.
Yeah, we put bars on our doors and our windows now. And now we used to have to do that, see. Leave the doors unlocked and open. Don't worry about it, see. That's going to happen to you.
Yep. I've heard of that. I haven't experienced it.
That's right, yeah.
So I think that point is an important one when we look at the faith-based initiative and the school voucher program.
Right. Yeah.
Because by alleviating the suffering in the ways that we've already talked about, that will lift up all Americans.
That's right, yeah.
And make everybody happier.
Make everybody happier, better, and better healthy, more healthy.
By improving the schools in this way, then there's fewer young people that are addicted to drugs,
right,
that are failing in school,
Right, yeah.
that are turning to crime.
An article in the last Christianity Today says the young people who go to church in the Sunday school, they get better grades. They make better grades in school, see. They turn out better all across America, see.
Wow.
That's right, yeah.
I believe that. Well, there's a lot of different reasons why that may be true, and we'll be looking into that further. One is that by the whole family going to religious activities and understanding the Christian philosophy, then they work together.
Yeah, absolutely.
They show love for each other and not anger.
That's right.
That reduces stress. I've got a ton of research which shows the connection between stress and poor performance in school.
Yeah. Right, absolutely, yeah.
You know, and I'm a living example of it.
Yeah.
And we'll get into that too. Okay.
Let's see. Christ came into our world to be the Savior. When it touches on any of these subjects, is always true, see. What it says in the Bible is the truth on any subject you can think of, see.
Well, I never would understand that before you gave me the Bible.
That's right.
But now that I've read the New Testament, part of the Old Testament, and the Proverbs,
right here,
that makes perfect sense. Now that I understand post-traumatic stress and how post-traumatic stress is related to poor health, poor medical health, poor mental health. So now that I've spent the last poor food, so now that I've studied that the last couple of years, it's sort of like, I'll mention it again, the lock and key analogy. When you illuminate the lock more and more, then you can understand better how the key fits in there. So that's going to be the purpose of our work together.
America needs to get back to God. When 9/11 came along, what did the president do first? He called for a day of prayer.